why don't we chat about the latest? Ravens cornerback Jaire Alexander Sarah was brought in free agency, the latter half of free agency. And we all kind of said to ourselves, like, wow, this is a steal in terms of the monetary value. Team friendly, 1 year, good for Jaire. He gets to potentially put good tape and hopefully healthy tape on film. And maybe he gets a chance to get paid in the offseason, whether it be in Baltimore or elsewhere. And then on the Ravens side of things, you're like, well, darn, if we can keep this guy healthy, which he wasn't able to do, unfortunately, consistently in Green Bay, especially in recent years, then we got ourselves a potential all-pro corner on the outside opposite Nate Wiggins, which would allow us to bring Marlon Humphrey in. Anyway, we haven't seen him in practice, Sarah, since August 9th until yesterday. And here's your injury report from Wednesday as provided by Ravens Productions. He did pop up on the list, but he was limited with a knee. It's important to remember that in early January or right around that time, he underwent a procedure for a torn PCL that ended his season in Green Bay and ended his time, really, just didn't know it then, as a Packer after they couldn't agree to a restructured contract. After Jaire, and we're going to get back to him in just a second, Daniel Alele popped up on this list with an illness. He was limited. Isaiah Likely, of course, is a DNP in the aftermath of his foot fracture and the procedure that followed, despite all of his tweets suggesting that, perhaps his return is imminent. We'll see if he gets back to practice like you maybe predicted or at least suggested earlier this week. And Pat Ricard, who hasn't practiced since August 9th with what we knew as a soft tissue until we now know, courtesy of this report, as a calf, also popped up as a DNP. So one, your thoughts on Jaire, and two, just this entire injury report as a whole.
Yeah, I wasn't super optimistic about Jaire just because John Harbaugh was talking about how they wanted to he was like, hey, it's a long season. He's going to be chomping at the bit, but we have to protect him. So we'll see if he actually plays, but I think this is a sign that he has left the door open, whereas with Patrick Ricard and Isaiah Likely, it doesn't feel like that door. I don't know. I don't want to say it's been completely shut, but I feel like it's more open for Jaire. And John Harbaugh was asked about all three. Like I said, he's in in-season form when it comes to injury stuff. So he said, quote, "We'll see," when he was asked about Jaire Alexander's availability for Sunday. With Isaiah Likely, he tried to be more optimistic, which I think is just him trying to play chess. I do not expect Isaiah to play. He says Isaiah Likely, quote, "may be ahead of schedule and is going to start getting antsy to return." And then he declined to comment on Patrick Ricard. So, yeah, like I said, I think the door is wider open for Jaire, a little bit more closed for the other two. But again, I'm sure before the end of the show, we will start getting the second day, meaning Thursday's practice participation. We'll see if anybody else has returned.
Yeah. And again, we can't reiterate it enough, right? The importance of Pat Ricard, but it's also a nice time, if you can't go, to know that you have the deepest tight end room, one of the deepest tight end rooms in the entire league. And as a couple of folks have already noted, and as we discussed earlier this week, they do have a fullback that could be a game day practice squad type of elevation. It's one of the undrafted rookies. It's Lucas Scott, who played his college football at Army West Point and was a former tackle too. So that'll be something to look out for. Sarah, on the Buffalo side of things, just so that we're being thorough, again, this is early in the week for injury reports, but Keon Coleman, their talented big body wide receiver that gave Brandon Stevens fits at times last year, sustained a groin injury. That was on Wednesday. That's also according to the official injury report that I'll pull up in just a second. Alex Brasky covers the Bills. He was deemed limited, as you'll see on the graphic that I pull up in just a second. And that also includes a couple other names, like wide receiver Khalil Shakir. He's got some big plays on tape. Ravens know him well. But here is the full list in total. Tyler Bass popped up. I believe they just signed a practice squad kicker too. I just saw that on the timeline not long ago. So we'll see what's up with Bass. He's got a left hip / groin designation, was limited. Christian Benford, their talented corner. He's also on here with a groin and was limited. Dwayne Carter with an Achilles, DNP. We mentioned Coleman. Khalil Shakir was a full participant dealing with an ankle. And Trey White, former Bill, former Raven, now back in Buffalo. he popped up with a groin. He was a DNP, and he also, Sarah, was somebody that the Ravens were comfortable letting walk in free agency after bringing him in really as a rental at the deadline last year, as we all remember.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you kind of compare these two lists heading into week one, I mean, Baltimore obviously appears to be healthier. Not that they're, 100%, but so Keon Coleman, that's a big one. That's a big one for it to kind of pop up. And then, obviously their other wide receiver is fully practiced, but just listed with an ankle. And so it's interesting, Bobby, because you'll recall Marlon Humphrey throughout the offseason talked a lot about how he felt teams no longer feared the Ravens defense like it did in the past. Okay. If Jaire Alexander can come in, let's say he can play week one, like he's certainly leaving the door open. I get the feeling he is chomping at the bit to want to get in here and be a part of this rivalry and be a part of the comeback of the Ravens defense and the rejuvenation of bringing fear into other people's stadiums and being like, dang, how many yards are we going to get? How many touchdowns are we going to get? Are we going to get he's just such a boon with his energy and his play combined. And so he can help that resurgence, especially in the secondary. I mean, we're about to play Josh Allen and the Bills. Josh Allen obviously can run. He's a threat in a different way from Lamar, but he's a threat where the Ravens defense has to worry about that. But remember, Ravens were number 1 in rush defense last year. They were number 31 in pass defense. Can Jaire Alexander and all these other moves, Malachi Starks, putting Kyle Hamilton more in a position that, they like to move him around, all that kind of stuff. Can they start putting the fear back into them? Roquan Smith was asked about it, and he felt like what Marlon had to say, he felt like there was some truth to it.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that, and I think it's more so about instilling fear into your opponents, and I think that just goes with the way you play ball, being relentless. Any chance you get to take a cat out, you take a cat out within the rules, obviously, but that's how you have to play and just play with an attitude. And I think we play with our edge and our attitude, play in, play out, and do to the best of our standard and to our standard, each and every individual that goes out there, and we'll instill that fear in the individuals. But it starts week one. We have to show the world exactly who we are because we know who we are. So it's about showing it and not having self-inflicted.
Sarah, had he not slipped in within the rules, that would have been taken so out of context and run with until the cows come home from the Bills fan base and by every other fan base that would have gotten a hold of that. But I appreciated that way of answering something that in a lot of ways could have been taken personally. Not everybody in this building watches every single press conference. When Nnamdi Madubuike was asked a similar question earlier this week, he pushed back in a sense. He said, look, Marlon's entitled to his opinion, but didn't necessarily lean into that. Roquan took it on the chin almost and said, there's some truth to that, and said, hey, we do have to be better. We understand that. And I appreciated that. Not that I thought that Nnamdi overstepped by any stretch, but this was a refreshing answer to something that we know has plagued them defensively speaking when it counts in January, and certainly is an opportunity for them to help their quarterback and momentum shift more in big time games where the margin for error is so thin.
Yeah, I appreciated it too, because I mean, there's as somebody who just covered the more fearful version of the Ravens defense, we remember Tom Brady on his forearm had written fine number 20 on every single play. I remember Peyton Manning talking about the chess matches he'd have with Ray Lewis. These are the best quarterbacks of the time. And when you have fine number 20 on every play, that suggests that the Ravens defense induces fear. You don't see that kind of stuff. You didn't see that last year. Certainly, how can you induce fear when you're the number 31st ranked pass defense in the league? And so I think it is also good to kind of acknowledge it so that you can address it. If you pretend it's not happening, then you really can't address it. And so I appreciate that. And I've always liked the way Roquan talks. He's like, we got to take a cat out. if we got, if we can within the rules, it's like sometimes we like to pretend that this isn't a violent sport. John Harbaugh just talked about it, I think a week or two ago. He's like, this is a violent sport. Lamar Jackson, I show speed. Don't come in here. You're going to get hit. Let us handle taking the hits. It's a violent sport. You have to do it within the rules. But sometimes we have to pretend that it's not. It absolutely is. And it's not for the faint of heart. You got to be unafraid in there. And the Ravens want to change that and make you afraid.
And we know where it starts. And Roquan said it himself, where it starts every game for this team, or where they pride themselves on. Stop the run. The Ravens gave up 147 rushing yards and 3 rushing scores to Buffalo in January, as Jeff noted here during Roquan's press conference. And we also know, again, what they did last year in the regular season, an NFL best 18.5%. That was their run stop rate, according to Next Gen Stats. It was elite, but it wasn't good enough when it counted. And you already know these guys are too prideful to forget what happened in that game, Sarah. And it starts with stopping James Cook. And of course, Josh Allen will kill you with his legs as well, with chunk yards, with his mobility, with everything that he presents as a dual threat quarterback. So, look, two massive keys, which are the low-hanging fruit elephant in the room. Stop the run and run the rock early, like they want to establish their dominance, just as they did on Sunday Night Football, Sarah, a year ago.
Yeah, and stopping the run is huge. Like, you always want to make your opponent one-dimensional. I'm just looking at the divisional round numbers now. James, I mean, there was so many guys that had, yards. James Cooks had 67. Ty Johnson had 31. Davis had 29, and then Allen had 20. They didn't even have to do too much because of all the turnovers that were going on that the Ravens were kind of gifting to them. But like, that's a lot of guys putting up some numbers. And again, like I said, Josh Allen, in a very different way from Lamar, can make you pay with his legs. He's going to bulldoze over you, right? And so you got to hit him and hit him hard so that he doesn't want to come and make that contact again.